3 years of marriage without touching her until the millionaire CEO saw her with another man. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. She married a billionaire CEO to save her parents from ruin. For 3 years, he ignored her, never touched her, never asked her name, until one night at a gala, another man kissed her hand, and the husband, who never cared, suddenly couldn't let her go. Now, she has 2 choices: believe the man who abandoned her, or trust the one who saw her from the start. Because sometimes, the only way to be truly loved is to walk away first. The wedding she never chose. It wasn't a love story, not the kind with flowers or fairy lights, or even a nervous first kiss. It was a Tuesday, gray, overcast, the kind of day when even hope stays indoors. Emily Peterson stood in front of a mirror, wearing a white dress that didn't feel like hers, in a room that didn't smell like home. Her mother was crying softly in the corner. Her father was pale, holding a glass of water, like it was a lifeline. She was 22. He was a billionaire, and in less than an hour, they would be husband and wife. They told her it was the only way, that the family business, her father's small accounting firm, was drowning, that William Anderson's company could save them, that all he wanted in return was a bride. Quiet, proper, invisible. "I'm not selling you." Her father had said that night, the guilt hollowing his voice. "We're all drowning, Emily. You're the only one who can save us." So she said yes, not for love, but for duty, for debt. The wedding was held in the Anderson family's winter estate. No music, no vows, no kiss, just 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, 1 cold glass of champagne she never touched. William Anderson barely looked at her. He shook her hand like a business associate, then walked out of the ballroom before the ink had dried. That night, she moved into a guest room at his mansion, and for the next 3 years, nothing changed. They never slept in the same bed. He never touched her, never even asked how her day was. In the mornings, he ate breakfast at 6:15 sharp. She learned to finish hers by 6:00, just to avoid the awkward silence. They passed each other like shadows. In public, he never mentioned her. In private, he barely acknowledged her, but she stayed. She watered the plants, took long walks through empty halls, folded towels that no one would use, because she had made a promise, and she had nothing else left to lose. Until one morning, he spoke, not to give orders, not to correct her posture or remind her about appearances. He said her name, Emily, and for the first time in 3 years, she turned around and saw her husband actually looking at her, not past her, not through her, at her. She wasn't sure what changed, but something had, because what he said next wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was strange. "Do you have a dress for a gala?" "A gala?" She blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "You'll be accompanying me tomorrow night." "Why?" she asked, voice brittle. "Because you're my wife," he replied, "at least on paper." That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart thudding in a rhythm it hadn't known in years. She wasn't sure why he wanted her there. She didn't know if it meant anything. But one thing was clear. Something was shifting in the quiet ruins of their marriage. Something was waking up, and in the glow of the hallway light, she whispered to herself, "Let him see me now, just once." Because after 3 years of being a stranger in her own home, she was finally done being invisible. Chapter 1: The Invisible Wife. Emily had mastered the art of being unseen. 3 years in that mansion, and she could tell you which floorboards creaked before sunrise, which stair skipped sound, which hallway let you vanish without ever having to explain yourself. Her world was 6:00 coffee. folded linens, a piano she no longer played, the wife of a billionaire. And yet, no one even knew her name, not even him. William Anderson was a legend in the business world. CEO, ruthless, brilliant, unshakably calm. His life was order, control, acquisition. He spoke in boardrooms, not bedrooms. His voice echoed on earnings calls, not across the dinner table. Emily had married him in a snow-covered courthouse and moved into his house like a tenant. Their first conversation after the wedding was about utilities. Their second was about tax deductions. There was no third. Every morning at 6, Femsheen. William had breakfast, alone, at the marble island in the kitchen that could seat 12, but never did. Emily learned to wake early enough to eat before he came down, not because he told her to, but because silence has a weight, and hers filled every room. She ate oatmeal quietly, washed her single dish, tucked herself back upstairs before his shoes ever touched tile. A routine of absence, a marriage in name only. She used to wonder if she was the problem, if maybe her voice was too soft, her clothes too simple, her presence too small. She had been raised to be agreeable, grateful, a good daughter, and when her parents' business nearly collapsed under debt, she did what a good daughter does. She married the man who could save them. Some days, she read old textbooks just to remind herself she had a degree. Other days, she rewrote her resume, not because she was applying for jobs, but because she needed to believe she still had value. Once, she had dreams to travel, to work in emerging markets, to build a business, not become part of one. Now she was just here, a ghost in silk slippers. But something shifted. The morning he said her name, she was halfway to the doorway, bowl in hand, ready to slip out unseen, like always. When his voice sharp, composed, cut the air, Emily, she froze. It wasn't the name that startled her. It was that he used it. She turned, heart stuttering. William stood at the base of the stairs, impeccably dressed. As always, black suit, silver tie, blue eyes that looked more like stone than sea. He didn't blink. Do you have something suitable to wear? To a gala? The words were flat, a statement, not a question. She frowned. A gala? It's for the firm. Tomorrow night. You'll be coming with me. Emily felt her pulse rise. This was new. He had never brought her to anything, never even acknowledged her beyond necessity. Why? Because, he said coolly, I need to appear as a stable family man. The words struck like frost. She felt them in her bones. So, I'm a prop now. He didn't answer, just adjusted his cufflink. You're my wife. At least, publicly. Emily straightened. And if I say no, William raised an eyebrow, almost amused. Then don't. But something in her cracked. She stepped forward, chin high. Do you even know what I do during the day? What I studied? What my favorite book is? He stared. A flicker of discomfort passed across his face, but he said nothing. That's what I thought, she whispered, setting down her bowl. I'll go, not because you asked, but because I'm tired of being a ghost in my own life. She left the kitchen with her head high and tears burning her throat. And behind her, William stood still, watching the woman he married disappear up the stairs like smoke. For the first time in 3 years, he realized he didn't know her at all. Chapter 2. The Gala That Woke the Dead. The dress wasn't new. Emily had bought it 3 years ago, back when she thought marriage meant dinner dates and weekend getaways. It was navy blue, fitted at the waist, with sleeves that whispered elegance without screaming wealth. She'd never worn it until tonight. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. She looked composed, poised, not like the invisible wife who wandered silent halls, but like someone who might belong in his world if only she believed it. Downstairs, the sound of keys on marble. William was ready. He didn't say much when she appeared at the top of the stairs, didn't compliment her, didn't gasp or stammer like men do in romance films. But his eyes, they lingered just a second too long. "You look appropriate," he said, voice smooth. And yet, there was a shift. In the car, they rode in silence. Los Angeles blurred outside the tinted windows, all lights and movement. Inside, it was cold air and unspoken questions. Emily stared out the window, but her mind raced. What would it be like to be introduced as his wife? Would they believe it? Would he? The Grand Beverly Hotel was a palace lit in gold. Valets opened the doors, cameras flashed, and people murmured names that didn't matter to her. William adjusted his tie like he was entering battle. She followed, heels clicking, heart hammering. Inside, it was everything she'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, laughter like glass breaking in slow motion. And suddenly, she was on his arm, his wife. "Smile. Be polite. Don't talk about business," he whispered. "So, be a decoration," she replied, eyes forward. He glanced at her, and for a fleeting second, something like amusement flickered in his expression. The moment came quickly. A man with salt and pepper hair approached, all charm and confidence. "William, you finally brought her." He turned to Emily, kissed her hand lightly. "Richard Thompson, international investor, and you must be the mysterious Mrs. Anderson, Emily," she replied, managing a smile. "The pleasure is mine." She watched William out of the corner of her eye. Something tightened in his jaw. "Tell me, Emily, do you speak any languages?" "French and Spanish," she said easily. "I used to work in international consulting." "Impressive." Richard smiled. "We could use someone like you in Argentina." William interrupted, sharp. "Emily doesn't work." The room went quieter. "What a waste," Richard replied, still watching her. "A woman like you should be more than a name on a guest list." For the first time in years, Emily felt seen, not as a wife, not as a placeholder, but as a person. The rest of the night passed in moments that left William noticeably unsettled. Every time Richard approached, William appeared standing too close, speaking too firmly, eyes too hard, like a lion circling a threat. Emily noticed, so did everyone else, and somewhere between the speeches and the final toast, she understood something. William Anderson, the man who had ignored her for 3 years, was jealous. In the car ride home, the air was thick. "You're not having dinner with him," he said flatly. "Yes, I am," she replied, voice calm. He turned to her, stunned. "Why?" "Because I want to remember what it feels like to be treated like I matter." He had no answer, and that silence, that small collapse in his pride, said more than any apology ever could. That night, Emily didn't cry, she didn't tremble, or doubt or shrink. She stood in front of her mirror, the navy dress unzipped, and whispered to her reflection, "You're not invisible anymore." And she smiled, because for the first time in 3 years, someone saw her, even if it wasn't her husband. Yet, Chapter 3. Dinner with another man. The invitation came at noon. A message on crisp ivory paper, slipped under her door by Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper. "Dinner tonight. 8 restaurant. I'll send a car." Emily stared at it for a long moment. The script was elegant, but not arrogant. Like its sender, she thought of saying no, but something in her heart, not rebellion, not revenge, just curiosity, whispered yes. William didn't mention it all day, but she noticed how his eyes followed her as she passed, not with affection, with suspicion, with unease. He came home early, unusual. "Going somewhere?" he asked casually, though his knuckles were white on the glass of scotch he was holding. "I am. With him. His name is Richard." And yes, she waited for anger. for a command, for cold detachment. What she got instead was a single word: why. Emily walked past him and down the stairs in silence. But just before she opened the door, she said, "Because I've forgotten what it feels like to be interesting." Richard picked her up in a navy car that matched her dress. A driver held the door. She felt like a person again. At dinner, he didn't ask about William. He asked about her, her degree, her work with Latin American trade negotiations, her fluency in French, and the poetry she used to love in college. "You're wasted in that house," Richard said, sipping red wine. "You should be leading teams, not hiding behind a man who doesn't see you." Emily didn't deny it. She laughed. Once. Really laughed. And it startled her, because she hadn't heard that sound in 3 years. Halfway through dinner, the temperature in the room shifted, not because of Richard. Because of him, William. He walked in like the storm he had been holding back for days. A tailored black suit, notier, blue eyes sharp enough to cut through glass. His presence alone silenced the room. He didn't greet the host. He didn't check in. He walked straight to their table. "Emily," he said quietly, but firmly, a word Richard stood, ever the gentleman. "We were just discussing business." William's eyes never left her. "It didn't look like business." Emily rose slowly. "You don't get to decide who I speak to. William, you're my wife, on paper," she said, her voice cool. The table fell into silence. Even Richard, who had charm in spades, stepped back. Outside the restaurant, the air was thick with city light and unsaid words. "Why are you doing this?" William asked, his voice lower now. "Is it to punish me?" "No. I'm doing this because for the first time in 3 years, someone asked me a question and listened to the answer." William's jaw tensed. "You can't trust him." "Can I trust you?" she asked, stepping closer. "You've known me for 3 years and still don't know what color my eyes are." He looked down. She stepped back. "Good night, William." He didn't follow her, but his voice, as she walked away, cracked under the weight of something he couldn't hide anymore. "I never meant to hurt you." She paused, just briefly. "But you did." That night, Emily stood in front of her mirror again, but something had changed. Her face wasn't just composed, it was alive. Not because of Richard, not even because of William, but because she had finally remembered who she was, and the ache in William's voice. That was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The fight in the restaurant. The second dinner was different. Emily wore a soft yellow dress that floated when she walked, with sleeves that kissed her wrists, and a neckline that whispered elegance, not invitation. Her hair was down. Her mind was not. This wasn't about romance. It was about choice. Richard had chosen a sunlit corner table in a quiet restaurant nestled in Beverly Hills, somewhere between elegance and calm, the kind of place where conversation didn't have to fight the music. They talked about work, international consulting, Argentina, emerging markets. He spoke to her like a colleague, not a woman to be saved. "You deserve to be known for your mind," Richard said, sincere, "not just the name you married into." Emily looked down at her water glass. "You're the first person to say that in 3 years." She didn't notice the figure at first, not until the air shifted, and Richard's posture stiffened. "William," he greeted, standing up with slow civility. Emily turned. William stood there, hands in his pockets, tie loosened, eyes trained directly on her. Not Richard, not the room, just her. "What a surprise," he said, but his voice wasn't surprised. It was thunder, disguised as courtesy. "You're interrupting," Emily said. "I'm joining," William replied, pulling out a chair, uninvited. "We were discussing work," Richard offered. "I'm sure you were," William said, eyes cold. Emily sat frozen, the menu unopened in front of her. She hadn't seen him like this before. Not jealous, something deeper. Possessive, frightened, desperate. William's tone sharpened like a knife against glass. You work with Anderson Enterprises now, Emily. Or did you forget? I never agreed to that. I offered. You assumed. She corrected, her voice quiet but cutting. There it was. The version of her he'd never met. Not the quiet bride. Not the obedient ornament. But the woman who bled dignity. The tension shattered like porcelain when William leaned forward. Tell me something, Richard, he asked, voice velvet over steel. Are you offering her a position or trying to seduce my wife? The room stilled. Richard drew in a breath. I think Emily can speak for herself. Yes, she said, fire rising in her. I can. Then speak. William challenged. Tell me what this is. This? Emily stood slowly, voice trembling with restraint. Is me remembering who I am. And what am I? William demanded. She turned to him, full of quiet fury. You're the man who married me for a contract, ignored me for 3 years, and now throws tantrums in public because someone else finally noticed I exist. People were watching. She didn't care anymore. The waiter arrived. No one ordered. Richard stood. I'll give you two a moment. No, William snapped. Sit down. Don't talk to him like that. Emily cut in. Don't embarrass yourself more than you already have. William's voice lowered, but the hurt was raw. Why are you doing this? Because I've waited 3 years for you to see me. And now that you do, I need to know, was it ever real? Or are you just afraid of losing something you never earned? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Emily left first. She walked through the restaurant like a woman who no longer needed permission to take up space. William followed moments later, the air thick with everything unsaid. In the parking lot, the fight followed them. You humiliated me in there, he growled. You humiliated me for 3 years, she shot back. You're my wife, then act like my husband. And for a moment, the world went still. They stood, face to face, under the amber glow of a parking lamp, the city behind them, the past between them. You don't know what you're doing to me, he whispered. Then learn, she replied. Then she got into Richard's car and left. That night, William stood in his office, untouched scotch on the desk, hands trembling, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of losing a deal, or a company, or his name. He was afraid of losing her, and he didn't know if he could live with that. Chapter 5. The truth about the marriage. It started with a folder, not locked away, not hidden in a drawer, just slipped behind the desk in William's home office, like something forgotten, like a truth waiting to be found. Emily wasn't looking for anything. She was organizing papers, tidying the space he always kept immaculate. But the folder fell when she shifted the books, and with it, the last thread of the world she thought she understood. The contract spilled across the hardwood floor. Legal terms, names, signatures, dates, and then her name. Clause 5. The marriage between William Anderson and Emily Peterson will secure the merger of Peterson Accounting into Anderson Enterprises. Her fingers went cold. There were stipulations, public appearances, family heirs, a 5-year clause, and nowhere in all the legal ink was the word love. By the time William walked in, she was sitting in the middle of the floor, pages spread around her like fallen snow. Emily, he said carefully, what are you doing? She didn't look up. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Silence. Tell me. Her voice cracked. That you didn't marry me just to take over my family's company. He stepped closer, too slowly. Let me explain? Explain, she whispered, finally looking at him. William, this is a contract about our marriage, about me, like I'm a transaction, a merger. He knelt beside her. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but it was, she said, holding up the paper with her name on it. You married me to buy your next acquisition. I was just the signature on the dotted line. I didn't know all the details, William said, voice breaking. My father handled most of it, but you signed. He said nothing. and you let me believe it was just about saving my parents. About the debt. You didn't tell me they gave you my family's company in exchange for me. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling beneath her. So that's why you never touched me, why you ignored me. Because I wasn't a wife, I was a tool. No, William said quickly, not anymore. Emily, everything changed. I changed. When another man made me laugh, when you realized someone else might actually see me. His face twisted in pain. You think that's love. Real love doesn't come after betrayal. William, it doesn't wait 3 years. It doesn't come crawling out of a boardroom contract. She started gathering the papers. What are you doing? He asked. Leaving. Emily. Don't, she said sharply. Don't say my name like it means something. You had 3 years to say it. You chose silence. She packed slowly, as if the motions might still wake her from a nightmare. One suitcase, a few dresses, nothing from the jewelry box. All of it. Gifts she now questioned. When she walked down the stairs, William was waiting at the door. Where will you go? Somewhere real. Let me make this right. Can you undo 3 years? She asked. Can you erase this? She held up the contract again. No, he whispered. But I can try to earn something real with you. She opened the door. Then prove it. How? Give it all back, she said. Return my parents' company. Undo the merger. Let go of the deal that bought me. William's silence said everything, and that was all she needed to hear. As she walked down the long drive, the cold Los Angeles wind swept through her dress. Her heart was breaking, but her steps were steady. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in years, she wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Chapter 6. The deal he gave back. The mansion was too quiet without her. William stood alone in his office, sleeves rolled up, papers strewn across the desk, but none of it mattered. Not the quarterly reports, not the stock price, not even the glowing article in Forbes that called him the most composed CEO of the decade, because the one person he wanted to see it was gone. Emily, his wife, his stranger, his heartbreak. The contract she found lay open in front of him. He traced her name on the page like it might forgive him. He had read the words 100 times, but tonight it read differently. Not like a win, not like leverage. It read like a wound. A deal sealed in ink that cost him everything that mattered. By sunrise, William was in the boardroom at Anderson Enterprises. His father, Robert Anderson, was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers in charcoal suits. The air smelled like old money and power. What is this about? Robert asked. You call an emergency meeting at 7 Gaming. I want to undo the Peterson merger, William said. Silence. The kind that only power could break. You're joking. His father finally said, No, I'm dissolving the deal. Effective immediately. Do you understand what you're saying? Robert snapped. That deal was worth $15 million. The acquisition is locked. The equity, give it all back. William slid a folder across the table. Inside were signed directives. Return the company, all assets, full control, back to David and Sarah Peterson. Let them keep the settlement money. No conditions. The lawyers looked stunned. Sir, one said cautiously, this goes against every legal strategy the firm has advised. The PR alone. I don't care. Robert's voice rose. Why? Why now? What's happened? Because I married her for business, William said, and I fell in love with her for everything else. He looked up, voice steady, and I won't have her love built on something that stole her family's future. This is emotional nonsense, Robert barked. You're not thinking straight. No, William said, finally calm. For once in my life, I am. That afternoon, he drove to the small house on Rosewood Lane. David and Sarah Peterson opened the door like they had seen a ghost. Sarah's hand trembled on the knob. David's shoulders stiffened. Mr. Anderson, David said. What brings you? William, he interrupted. Please, I'm not here on business. I'm here because I've wronged your daughter. He sat in their living room. No lawyers, no press, no entourage, just a man one who had everything finally ready to give it all back. You can have the company, he said. Every share, every right, it's yours again. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Because I don't want Emily to think I only loved her. Because she came with terms. David lowered his eyes. You do love her. Enough to give up everything. If it means she might believe it. Across town, in a modest hotel room, Emily stood staring at the rain streaking the window. She hadn't touched her phone all day. Couldn't, because how do you trust someone who built your marriage like a business plan? She hadn't cried since the night she left, not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside her had hardened. Then her phone buzzed. One message, one sentence. I gave it all back. Every dollar, every deal. I meant it. Emily, she dropped the phone, sat down slowly on the bed, and for the first time since walking out, she let herself hope. Chapter 7. The Letter. She wasn't supposed to find. It was raining again when Emily returned to the mansion, not because she had forgiven him, but because she needed closure, a final conversation, a goodbye. The housekeeper had offered to box her things. Emily declined. Some things you need to do with your own hands. She climbed the stairs slowly, half expecting to find the air still cold with silence. But something had changed. There were flowers in the hall now, a framed photo of their wedding day on the console table, though they hadn't smiled in it. And in her old room, the bedding had been replaced, new, soft. She sat down at her desk, opened the drawer she never used, and found the letter. It was folded once, tucked beneath a forgotten envelope. No stamp, no postmark, just her name, written in his handwriting, Emily. Her hands shook as she opened it. The ink was smudged in places, as if he'd written it late, in anger, or in fear, or maybe both. She began to read. Emily, there are 1,000 things I want to say, and not one of them feels enough. I've sat here night after night staring at this blank page, trying to put into words what you never asked to hear. I know I failed you. I know I let silence stand in for kindness, and distance stand in for honesty. And if you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to say this out loud. You were never the deal. You were the part that scared me the most, because you were kind and quiet and strong in ways I didn't understand. You didn't demand my attention. You just stood there, day after day, not asking for anything. And somehow, that shattered me more than screaming ever could. I told myself I didn't need love, that I was protecting you by keeping my distance. But I see now I was protecting myself from you, from the truth that I love you, have for a while now, and I'm terrified. I've missed the moment when it still mattered. If I never give you this letter, it's because I couldn't stand the answer. But if you ever find it, please know you are the only thing in my life that wasn't a transaction. Emily pressed the page to her chest. He never meant for her to see this. This wasn't strategy. It wasn't a performance. It was the heart of a man raised by power, finally breaking open. She didn't know how long she sat there. The rain had stopped. The world outside was golden with sunset. Down the hall, she heard the creak of a door. His door. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. Then his voice, barely above a whisper. You found it. She turned around. He stood in the doorway, unshaven, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Why didn't you give it to me? She asked softly. Because I didn't think I deserved for you to know I loved you. She looked down at the letter. You still might not, I know, but it's a start. He stepped forward. I meant every word. She nodded. Her eyes, never leaving his. Then prove it, not with flowers, not with money, with time, with truth, with presence. He took another step. I will, every day, she said. Not when I'm leaving, not when you're afraid. Every day, he promised. And then for the first time since their wedding, she let him take her hand. No fanfare, no kiss. Just two people standing in the wreckage of what they used to be, starting again, from truth, from ashes, from a letter he was never brave enough to send, but needed her to find. Chapter 8. The Emergency at Midnight. It started with a noise, a crash sharp, sudden, like glass meeting tile. Emily bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. The clock read 12. Rosetta M. The house was still, too still. But she knew that sound didn't come from her dreams. It came from the hallway. She ran barefoot toward the light spilling from under William's office door. Her pulse thudded in her throat. William, she called, her voice trembling. No answer. She pushed the door open. He was on the floor, pale, sweating. One hand clutched his chest. The other was reaching weakly for the phone that had landed just out of reach. William, she screamed, dropping beside him. His lips moved, but no sound came. His breathing was ragged, shallow. A broken sound escaped him, half cough, half whisper. Hospital. He gasped. Now. The ER was a blur. Flashing lights, shouting voices, the scent of antiseptic and urgency. Emily sat alone in the waiting room, her hands covered in his blood from where he'd split his palm on the broken whiskey glass. She stared down at the crimson streaks. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was always in control, always composed, even when he was cruel. Now, he looked like a boy, fragile and frightened. The doctor came out 30 minutes later, too calm, too slow. Is he stable? The doctor interrupted gently. Stress-induced arrhythmia, possibly triggered by exhaustion, high blood pressure, emotional trauma. He collapsed because his body couldn't take anymore. Emily covered her mouth. The relief almost crushed her. Can I see him? The doctor nodded. He was asleep when she stepped into the room. Pale against white sheets, a machine beeped steadily beside him. An IV line taped to the inside of his arm. His usually perfect hair was tousled, damp with sweat. Emily sank into the chair next to his bed and watched his chest rise and fall. Why didn't you tell me you were hurting? She whispered. Why did you carry it all alone? There was no answer, just the quiet rhythm of a man who had spent years building empires, but didn't know how to ask for help. She stayed the night, didn't leave his side. In the morning, his eyes opened slowly, confused, tired. But when they landed on her, something soft settled into his face. You stayed, he murmured. Of course I did. He swallowed hard. You didn't have to. She reached for his hand. You don't get to push me away anymore, William. Not when you're sick. Not when you're scared. I don't want to be this man anymore, he said quietly. Then don't be. He looked at her. Really looked. You could have left. I almost did. But you didn't. She smiled gently. I read your letter. He blinked, emotion tightening his throat. I meant every word. Then rest. Heal. And when you're better, we'll begin again. And just like that, the story of them started to turn. Not with fireworks, but with IV drips and whispered promises in sterile hospital light. Because love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives at midnight, in an emergency room, when the person you least expected is the one who never leaves your side. Chapter 9. The Keys to the Diner. It was a week after the hospital. William was home again, slower than before, quieter too. He moved through the house like a man adjusting to gravity. No more meetings, no more boardrooms, just rest, doctor's orders. But healing wasn't just in the body. It was in the silence, in the way Emily sat beside him, with a book, never asking for anything. In the way he watched her hands when she brewed coffee, memorizing her again. And in the way he whispered one morning over eggs, "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." The drive was long. Through streets she didn't recognize. He didn't explain, just held her hand gently across the gear shift. Like it was something fragile and holy, they pulled up to a street corner in East Pasadena, where an old brick diner sat wedged between a laundromat and a florist. The paint was peeling. The sign above the door read, "Millie's Place." Emily turned to him, puzzled. "This is yours?" "No," he said, turning off the ignition. "It's yours." Inside, the diner smelled like cinnamon and coffee grounds, the kind of place where waitresses call you hon, and the radio still plays old country ballads. William walked to the counter and reached behind it, pulled out a small box, set it on the table between them. "I bought it last week," he said, quietly. No lawyers, no headlines, just me and the former owner, and a handshake. "Why?" "Because you once said, on our second night together, that your dream wasn't to sit in boardrooms or attend galas." He smiled. "You said your dream was to own a place like this. A small, quiet diner, somewhere people felt at home, where you could serve something warm and real." She blinked, stunned. "You remembered that." "I remembered everything," he said, voice tight with emotion. "Even the things I pretended not to hear." He slid the box to her. Inside were 3 things: a gold-plated key, a deed in her name, and a note in his handwriting that read, "For the woman who deserved 1,000 dreams before I ever gave her one." Emily couldn't speak. The tears came before the words. She pressed a hand to her lips, overwhelmed. "You did this for me." "For us," William said, "but mostly for you, because I needed you to know. I see you now, not as my wife, not as part of a deal, just as you." She looked around the little space, the cracked vinyl booths, the sun-drenched windows, and in that moment, she saw her future, not as an extension of his empire, but as a woman standing on her own ground. They spent the afternoon sweeping floors and laughing at the old jukebox that still worked. He rolled up his sleeves, fixed a squeaky hinge, and burned the first batch of grilled cheese. "You're going to need better kitchen staff," she teased. "I plan to marry the owner," he replied, "so I'm hoping for special treatment." She threw a towel at him, but her heart was melting. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, William locked up the diner and handed her the keys. "You're not going to take them back tomorrow, are you?" she asked softly. "Never. Not even if I change my mind." He paused. "Even if you do, they'll always be yours." She stepped into him, rested her head against his chest, and for the first time in their whole tangled story, she felt truly chosen, not for a contract, not for an image, but for who she was. Chapter 10. The Proposal Under Rainlight. It was supposed to be just another Thursday, the kind where clouds swelled over Los Angeles, but never truly broke, the kind where everything hangs suspended air, breath, decisions. Emily was closing up the diner. She'd stayed late, wiping down the last booth by the window, humming along to the old jukebox as it played something soft and twangy. The scent of coffee lingered in her sleeves, the kind of scent that felt like home now. It had been 3 months since the hospital, 3 months of slow mornings and real conversations, of William bringing her flowers from the corner market instead of diamonds, of nights on the porch, hands intertwined, and no more pretending. They weren't perfect, but they were honest, and Emily had finally begun to believe that love, even late, even broken, could still be real. The bell above the door jingled. She didn't turn around. "We're closed," she called over her shoulder. "That's unfortunate," came a familiar voice. She froze, turned. William stood there, drenched from the rain, his white shirt clinging to him, the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No driver, no suit jacket, just him, raw, bare, his heart in his hands. "You walked here?" she asked. I needed time to think. And he stepped forward slowly, raindrops still sliding down his hairline. And I realized something. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, soggy, crumpled at the edges. Emily's breath hitched. "William, let me say it, just once, all the way through." He knelt, right there on the black and white tile floor. "Emily, Peterson Anderson, I didn't know what love was when I married you. I didn't even know what life was. I was taught to win, to acquire, to conquer, but you taught me how to stay. You stayed through silence. You stayed through storms. You stayed even when I didn't know how to ask you to. And now if you'll let me, I want to stay with you in every small, beautiful, messy moment we have left." He opened the box. Inside was a new ring. Simple, elegant, no diamonds, just a delicate gold band with a tiny engraving on the inside. She leaned forward and read it. "Chosen, not sold." Her hands flew to her mouth. "Will you marry me?" he asked softly. Again, this time for love, only love. Tears pooled in her eyes. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The rain started again as they stepped outside, but neither of them ran for cover. They stood in it. Let it soak them. William took her face in his hands, kissed her in the street-light rain, while water danced on their cheeks and hair. The world, for once, slowed down to watch. A week later, they were married again, not in a cathedral, not on a yacht, but in the backyard behind the diner, under strings of warm yellow lights and 100 umbrellas held by laughing guests. Emily wore a dress with sleeves and pockets. William wore his heart openly. And when the officiant asked if they had anything personal to say, Emily looked into his eyes and whispered, "You were once the deal that broke me. Now you are the love that rebuilt me." They kissed. The rain came again, gentle this time, and no one ran, because sometimes love comes twice in a lifetime, and the second time, it chooses you back. She was never meant to be invisible. Some stories don't start with fireworks. They start in silence, in quiet kitchens, where breakfast is served without eye contact, in marriages signed on dotted lines, in lives where love is something people talk about but never live. That was Emily's world. She was the invisible wife, the paper bride, the woman no one looked at twice, until the man who never touched her fell in love with the way she never asked for anything, and somehow gave him everything. William Anderson thought power meant control. That strength meant never needing anyone. But in the stillness of a hospital room, in the rainlight behind a diner, he learned that real strength is vulnerability, and love, true love, is never bought. It's earned, day by day, choice by choice, word by word. Now, when people pass Millie's place on the corner of Rosewood Lane, they see a couple laughing behind the counter, a baby sleeping in the back room, two hands that never stopped reaching even when everything else fell away. Not a perfect life, but a real one. A story not built on contracts, but on courage. And if you've ever felt like Emily, unseen, unheard, unchosen, let this be your quiet reminder. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are worth the kind of love that stays, even after the rain. What did you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. And stay tuned. More powerful stories are waiting for you right here. If this story stirred something in you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more stories where love heals the wounds power never could. And if you're ready, come meet us in the next one, because the next videos goes even deeper. See you there.